Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, a crazy neighbor called the cops on me because I removed my kiddie pool and refused to let her kids trespass on my property to swim. Here is how you deal with a crazy neighbor. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, Getting Revenge on a Neighbor. I reside in one of those dual houses built adjacent to each other with mirrored layouts sharing a single wall but entirely separate otherwise. For years the neighboring house belonged to a kindly elderly woman barely noticeable or troublesome. When she passed away and the property changed hands, the troubles commenced. Enter our target, who I will refer to as Jack Swagger, for reasons that will soon become evident. Jack owns a sizable construction firm and dabbles in real estate on the side. He acquired the house and rented it out to a crew of foreign construction workers employed by his business. I emphasize foreign because it's relevant. Rumors swirled that Jack was engaging in some shady practices to have them work for him dirt cheap, claiming they were nationals in their home countries and paying them accordingly, far below our nation's minimum wage. Not exactly above board if you ask me. Possibly unreported labor as well. Anyway, he crammed 4 to 6 of these fellows into the said house for them to reside while working here. Now, I have no qualms with foreign construction workers, but these guys living next door had 2 highly problematic traits. They were excessively loud and they did not give a damn about anyone else. We are talking non-stop music and partying from Thursday evening straight through the entire weekend until they left at 5 AM Monday morning for work. Seriously, I don't know how or when they slept, it was literally non-stop. We are talking, I'm wearing headphones, but I still cannot hear my own sound over their music. That is how loud it was. As it appeared, they had designated the living room, adjacent to our shared wall, as the party zone where the fun happened. At first I did the neighborly thing and sucked it up, thinking, it is just one party, just one weekend. After the 3rd consecutive one, I went over to ask them to turn it down since, you know, nighttime disturbance is technically illegal to blast music this loud. Audible on the street across the street by my other neighbors who had also complained. I was met with a half-hearted, "So sorry, we'll fix it." Except nothing changed. I went over several more times, angrier each time met with, "But it's not loud." If I can hear your music in my house over my own TV and music, I would say that it is, in fact, too loud. So then I contacted Jack, their landlord, and explained the situation, after which I was met with an abrupt, sorry, not my effing problem. Basically, Jack told me to get lost. So I involved the police and called them every time things got out of hand. After about a dozen calls, sometimes even twice in the same night, it was clear that even regular police interference did not help the situation. I should mention here that I'm a lawyer, so I know what the next legal steps are. I also know what, other than a token paper from a judge saying their music is too loud, I'm not really gonna get anything. Things would, like they already sometimes had, become a cat and mouse game where they would blast their music extremely loud to piss me off or wake me up for a few brief moments, so that by the time I could get proof or the police showed up, there would be no music. I was deadlocked, with my only further option being pretty useless and a waste of time. At this point, I was biding my time and just waiting until something changed. I'm not saying that I condone people who bludgeon their neighbor to death with a rusty pipe, but I do somewhat understand what would drive someone to that point. The mistake, one day, I was at home and noticed quite a commotion next door, more so than usual. Suddenly, I saw through my garden window that a wall was being partially torn down. You see, at some point over the years, the neighbors had built a small adjacent side building adjoining the main house. It was right on the border between us, and when the gardens were being refenced, the wall was used as a divider to save on fencing. Said wall was now in the process of having its top part ripped off by a crane. I was not informed of any of this, which, while not technically needed, would have been the courteous thing to do. I took a walk to assess the situation and saw that they had torn down the entire side building, with the remaining wall between our gardens being the only part kept intact, and even then, not the top part. Being a lawyer, and specifically a construction/permit lawyer, I knew 2 things. Stuff like this is not allowed without a pre-approved permit from the city. There was no way in hell they had said permit, as I would have seen the application. I regularly have to check the online, public, accessible by everyone, application to see what permits are being applied for in my job, and when I do, I tend to look over my own area just to keep up with what is being planned. This was it though, the moment I'd been waiting for. The situation had changed and the time had come to exact revenge. A quick email to the municipal authorities let me do my civic duty of reporting a potential crime. The fact that someone was building or demolishing crap without a permit. Since this was a simple report, no response happened since I was not an official victim or anything yet. Since no further construction happened for a few days and everything was removed, I assumed that was that, and they would only tear down the side structure since it was starting to fall apart due to age anyway. The neighbors had moved all their stuff that was in said building onto their lawn and haphazardly covered it with a tarp. The next week, more construction materials were being delivered and construction started. I sent a new email to the city services with new pictures saying that apparently there was more planned and that I hoped they would undertake appropriate action. An instant response came less than an hour later. They had called Jack after the first time to inform him that what he was doing required a permit, and he had assured them that he didn't know that. BS, he's in construction, of course he knows, and that he would stop construction and request a permit. They called him again after my email, reprimanded him for not following this earlier promise, and he said again that he would shut it down. I happened to be working from home that day and had to stop myself from waving to the construction crew as they left. Later that day, I got an angry phone call from Jack, who accused me of reporting him and that I would be sorry. He would come after me for damages for his delays. I respectfully informed him that even if I reported him, reports are in my name but not published and anonymized in later files, I would not have done anything wrong because from the looks of it, he did not have a permit and should have known that before he started working illegally without one. I ended the call before I started to sound too happy with things. Jack had at this point no idea what I had initiated with this. He was Jack's swagger and I had just rung the bell that awakened the kraken that would destroy him. He just didn't know it yet. Well, the kraken, you see, there's a good reason why most people consult an expert or a lawyer when they wanna apply for a permit. The rules involved are so convoluted and needlessly complex that navigating them as a non-professional is extremely hard and time-consuming, and a single mistake can torpedo your entire case, forcing you to do it all over again. I have killed entire projects and have seen clients' projects killed by pointing out that on page 127, section 35(1)(a), something was left blank that should have been answered. I did some digging and found out that the previous owners of the houses had actually consulted each other about the side building and agreed on making the wall part of the divider between their gardens. So much so that they shared the cost of it and the ownership. That wall that he destroyed part of? Well, it was also my wall, which of course means I'm entitled to damages, but that's not the important part. The important part is that he needs my permission to do anything to that wall. So when he applied for a permit a few weeks later, added bonus, rowdy neighbor stuff was still out in the open, covered by just a tarp since they expected this to be a quick smash and replace job that would take a few weeks at most, so I went to the city center and looked at the application. I noticed that they were planning to do some stuff to said wall that I own 50% of. So of course I filed a complaint following proper procedure about the permit, namely that even if granted it could never be executed since Jack needed permission from me regarding the wall and he didn't have it. Nor was I intending to grant it. This should kill his permit since permits cannot be granted if you know in advance that they cannot be realized. No sense granting a permit to build a certain kind of house when you know they're never actually gonna build it. Now, Jack was a bit of a smooth talker, and as a construction entrepreneur, he had his connections, and permits are a political decision here just as much as a legal one. So despite a 100% correct legal objection that should have killed his permit, it went through. He actually called me about it to gloat a little. No worry, one can appeal a permit in my country. The only requirement is that you pay a €100 fee, which I gladly paid. The appeal instance is a subnational instance and doesn't care one bit about Jack's political ties or the half-hearted BS that the city officials wrote to justify granting him the permit despite the concerns I raised. They terminated his permit without any hesitation on the aforementioned legal grounds. Jack saw his permit blocked until he fixed the issue, which he couldn't because I wasn't really inclined to agree with his plans for our wall, you see. At this point, going through 2 lengthy procedures, it had been over 7 months. The neighbors had an unfinished construction project in their yard the entire time, forced to store their stuff elsewhere, something that was always supposed to be a temporary thing for a few weeks while we built, turned into something that was taking months with no end in sight. But wait, there's more. The above was the administrative part of the matter, him getting the permit. Now, doing construction work without a permit is also a criminal offense. And of course, my report got passed around to the appropriate instances, so now Jack was also the subject of a criminal procedure for construction offenses. Not only did he risk fines and jail time, but he was a construction business and used his own construction business for the work he did on the property. So his company was also on the hook, and one of the sentences that can be given in these types of crimes is to be prohibited from doing construction or construction-related activity as a business, either permanently or temporarily. Not only was he personally on the line, but his entire business was as well. During this debacle, Jack tried to sell the property. This did not really go too well for a few reasons. Number 1, the property was inflicted with an illegal situation. The demolished side building was torn down illegally, and until said illegal status was resolved, it would stick to the property. Which tends to kill the property value quite a bit, since nobody wants to buy something that they'll have to spend time and money on to make legal again by either rebuilding the torn down building or getting a regularization permit for it. Made even worse by the fact that he applied for a said permit and had it denied, so he couldn't even claim that said permit would be super easy to get. Secondly, Jack never intended to sell the property in its current state. What he, as I now know, has done in the past is buy cheap old houses like the one next to me, put some of his crew in it who cannot complain about the subpar accommodations. They then trash the place because they don't care, and he lets them. Then when the place is done, he tears it down and sells it to a developer or develops it himself. However, due to his construction crime and the accompanying status for the property, step 2 was not an option. He could not renovate it the way it needed to be. Small renovations would not be enough because covering the crime was always a requirement in any permit he would request for the building, and because of me, he couldn't cover it. He could not sell it either because the place was trashed, and any developer looking at it would dip out when they realized there was a construction issue and a vocal neighbor who would oppose anything big that they would try to do there, with plenty of easier properties to develop than that one. In conclusion, anyway, that is where we are today. Jack is staring down the barrel of a criminal court procedure that is about to happen, where he is risking his business and livelihood. His existing projects also gather special attention from city services now, since he is now outed to them as someone who cuts corners on permits and regulations. He cannot really sell the property unless he cuts a massive loss, since in its current state it is absolutely trashed. He also cannot develop it or sell to a developer because all development plans involve the adjoining wall, which he cannot use in big ways unless he gets my permission. The rowdy neighbors are stuck living in a smaller house than what they had in a place they trashed, but that cannot really be renovated or fixed in the major way that it needs. They have since quieted down a lot, possibly because Jack blames them for his current situation, which is not wrong, I suppose. I have awakened the Kraken and set it off on Jack's swagger, and it utterly ruined him. And the best part is that I had to do very little to make it happen. All I really did was nudge the abomination that is municipal bureaucracy and point it in his direction, and they did the rest. He called me up fuming, demanding I let him use the wall however he needed to fix this mess and show good faith in court. Jack said through gritted teeth, "Not my effing problem," I replied smugly, savoring the sweet taste of revenge as I ended the call. And yeah, ripe stars, props to OP for getting this kind of revenge. I would say that it goes into the territory of pro-revenge, but I'm also curious if you would call this nuclear, pro, or maybe even petty revenge. Let me know in the comments, and after you are done, let's read the next one, which is the title story of this video. It's titled, "Neighbor calls 911 because I removed my kiddie pool and installed a fence on my property." Sometimes it is hard to understand why people do the things they do. People will cheat on you, take you for granted, sue you, defile your name, and try to take what is rightfully yours. In this case, I did my best when it came to my own rights and my own property. When I realized how baseless and senseless people can be, you start to wonder just how on earth you're supposed to get by in today's world. If things are getting worse now, I cannot imagine what the future will be like when people will cheat, connive, and sneak their way into riches just to get ahead. So my dilemma though was a kiddie pool. Yes, a kiddie pool. My neighbor Darla and her kids would always come over and use it. Darla is your typical Karen, angry, annoying, and entitled. Her kids will probably be like her someday. I did not like how they trespassed on my property, let's be real here. There would be times where I would be sitting out in my backyard sunbathing, sipping a cocktail, listening to music, and they would come running over and jump in it. After I told them to stop, they finally did, but then it started again. This past summer, I think the kids got a little bit older, and I thought that as they would get older, they would have more common sense, but apparently not. Now, don't get me wrong, you might think I'm a creep or a weirdo for using a kiddie pool, but I like to dip my toes in it because I hurt my ankle on the job and I like to sit out and sunbathe on my patio and just watch the birds with my binoculars and the pleasant breeze come up from the lake. When Darla's kids came up and used my kiddie pool, that one day after I left, I was infuriated. They had splashed around, brought some little rubber duckies over and were creating a mess. After I had left and gone to work, I came home to find dirty socks and shoes and underwear laid out on my patio. My backyard is pretty messy, it has a lot of junk in it. I guess maybe the kids thought that the kiddie pool was junk too and that they could use it just however they wished. But they were wrong, this is my house, my property, and nobody is allowed here. It's trespassing. So I did what any normal sane person would do, I put up a fence around my property. I had not told Darla anything about it and before we had been on good terms, but lately she just hasn't talked to me and I didn't really mind it too much. However, I found out she had called 911 on me because she thought that putting up a fence was a hate crime and I was discriminating against her kids. I got a little bit ticked off. She claims that the fence is keeping her kids from enjoying the pool while all along they were not allowed over there anyway because it is my property. So when I removed the kiddie pool and set it up against my back garage, she comes outside on her porch and starts screaming at me. What do you think you're doing with that kiddie pool? That's not yours. My kids have been using it the whole entire time. You need to put it back. I guess she thought that somehow the kiddie pool was on her property. Or maybe it was on the property line or something. You need to return that right now, she screamed. You never bought that at all. It's been here before you even moved in. My kids love that and you're discriminating against them. I looked at her with disbelief, I shrugged it off and waved at her and then went back inside. The next day I hear a knock at my door. It's Darla, the angry Karen, who just wants to destroy my life. Yes, Darla, what is it? She looked at me with anger. I said you need to get that pool back over there and put it up. I'm not touching it. My 2 kids want to play in it. I don't want them jumping in that lake and drowning. So where is it, huh? You need to put it up right now. That's not yours and it doesn't belong to you. I see all that trash and junk in your backyard and you think that you can take and claim to anything? Well, not this. I know the type of person that you are. You hate everybody in this neighborhood and you even hate yourself. You probably even hate my kids too. This is a hate crime. I'm tired of your antics. My kids have a right to use that pool. They've been using it for years and suddenly you just take it away from them. What kind of person are you anyway? You're so full of hate and discrimination. I responded back to her, no, that's not what you think. Calm down, that's my pool and this is my property and they are not allowed on it. She goes off on me again. No, you listen, you've got a big problem. I'm gonna take care of you right now. I'm calling 911. I'm not gonna allow you to take things and claim that they are yours. This is a free country, you know, and you expect that you can go ahead and just make any kid stay worse than it is. Well, you got it wrong, buddy. About an hour later, the cops showed up and knocked on my door. One of the cops asked, "Are you Daniel?" Yes, I am. I knew where this was going. And do you live here? Yes, I do. We got a call from your neighbor Darla. She says that you stole a piece of her property and that you're causing some problems over here with her pool. I looked at the cops in disbelief. Well, you see that kiddie pool out there was mine and she is claiming that it was hers. They both looked at me and shrugged. Well, she's saying that you're perpetrating a hate crime and that the kiddie pool was not on your property line, that it was in the common ground area and that her kids have every right to use it. She said that you put up a fence to try and block them out from using it. Is that true? Yes. Well, I did because they were trespassing on my property. That's not a crime, right? They both looked at me and one of them said, "We'll go ahead and let this one off. If anything happens, let us know. Between us, I suspect we'll probably hear another call from her again soon." After a few weeks go by, I noticed that Darla continued to nag and direct mean comments at me. Every time I would go out and use the kiddie pool, she would swing her fist in the air and yell at me, "You're such a hateful person. What are you doing with that thing? It's not even yours. You're such a hateful, mean-ass person and a bigot. Don't you realize that my kids need that pool too? They want to have some fun. It's not yours. You can just go dive in the lake and drown for all I care." I looked back up to her as she stood on her deck. "Listen, Carla, this is my property. Don't you understand? Trespassing is illegal and your kids are no exception. They are not allowed here and I suggest you stop with the comments. And by the way, you calling 911 has not helped at all. It's made the problem worse. This kiddie pool was not on any common ground in the neighborhood. It's on my property and it's mine. I bought it." A couple days go by and again Darla calls the cops on me. Only this time I'm in the backyard using the kiddie pool and the cops walk around to the side of my property line and look over the fence. "Sir, we've received numerous calls about this kiddie pool and your fence." I interrupted them. "There's no need for you to be here. I understand what's going on. This is my property and I can do whatever I want." The police ended up leaving that day and dismissing Darla's claims. They realized that it was my property and I had every right to it, and there's no need for any confrontation or argument or allowing her to use the kiddie pool. It's total nonsense that she would go this far and do that, but in today's world it doesn't really surprise me anymore. I knew that I had to do something more though, because I knew Darla would be at it again. I knew that she would probably make outlandish claims and say that I did something to her kids, or that the fence is somehow over the property line, or some garbage like that. So I went into my local attorney's office and hired a lawyer to take care of this incident. I was gonna put this to rest once and for all. After finding a lawyer, I contacted them and told them everything about what she had done. We sent her a cease and desist letter and warned her that any further action would result in her getting legal action. The next week I'm out in the backyard again in the kiddie pool, and Darla comes out on her porch screaming and yelling with the letter in her hand. "What is this? A cease and desist letter? You have the nerve to do this to me? I'm livid. You're just plain ridiculous, you know that?" And I could tell from the look in her eyes that she could do nothing at all. She had no ground to stand on, and in the end her children were trespassing on my private property, and I had every right to put up a fence to detract them and keep them off of it. I mean, what if they had done something on my property and gotten injured? This anger, Karen could have sued me or got in my face and started a confrontation that could have ended up pretty badly. So really, I'm glad I put up that fence. I'm not trying to do anything because of hatred or discrimination or the way somebody is. I'm just trying to protect myself here and keep people from trespassing on my property. Is that not enough? And now that I know that she has a cease and desist letter against her that my lawyer sent, if she tries to trespass again with her kids, then things are gonna get nasty. I could file a restraining order or something and call the cops on her for having been on my property, or worse, create even more trouble just because she has decided to take matters in her own hands, such as suing for damages. I'm just glad I still have my kiddie pool and sanity back. And yeah, Ripe Stars, it seems like Karen in this story was clearly on some kind of drugs or something, and just because she has no space for a big kiddie pool in her garden, she was constantly harassing OP. However, I'm glad that things turned out to be okay for OP in the end, and I hope this Karen will never harass or trespass on OP's property again. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.